of the aspects which are kind of a practical example. So from an agenda perspective, there are two different methods that can be used. They're not really different, but one starts from the overall industry level beta and then talks about adjusting it. The second is when you have a bunch of individual companies and you can calculate the beta for each of those companies and then aggregate it and then again repeat the process of unleveraging and releveraging. Okay, this second method has been detailed out by the ICAI in its Professional Insight Series 3. And they've done a fairly good way of exhibiting how to do that method. And in Excel calculation, I can show you the working as to how I have implemented that in one valuation assignment that I am currently on the verge of completing. So we can also get into Excel in due course of this session briefly and see how the calculations have been done, because at the end of the day this is about not just a theoretical session, but tomorrow if one of us has to actually perform these steps, one should be able to do that, and this session is aimed to kind of assist you in doing that. So let's kind of jump into this session, and in between if anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me or ask additional questions. I'd be more than willing to kind of answer any queries. So in the first part of this presentation, what I will be doing is that we'll just cover a few basics. The reason being that, you know, what I realized is that the group of valuers comes from different streams. There are some of us who are company secretaries, but not have been exposed to the quantitative aspects of financial analysis very much, either as part of their curriculum or maybe once they qualify. Even for those of us who are maybe chartered accountants or cost accountants or MBA finance, the fact is that a lot of us might be deep into taxation and auditing and might have very quickly forgotten the quantitative aspects of finance and FP&A that we may have learned as part of our qualification process. So the first couple of slides will kind of help us to brush up and refresh what we studied earlier on. And in fact, some of the basics are can at times surprise you. New dimensions and new aspects keep coming up to items that we think we had pretty well understood when we were studying it. So it makes sense for us to go through that once, revisit those once again. And then importantly, what we'll also cover is what is different in the case of unlisted companies, the challenges and how we have to overcome those challenges. Is that fine? Clear so far?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you can switch on your video also.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll do that. Just give me a minute.
Yes.
Okay. Hope it's fine now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's start with a few basics. As I said, some of this may be a little really basic, but this might be important. So what we're saying is that, so the weighted average cost of capital estimation is one of the most critical steps in conducting a valuation exercise. And many assumptions that may be stated or unstated actually creep in here. And we need to be aware of both the stated and unstated assumptions that we make. And what I remarkably found is that this number 1 can be very, psychologically deceptive number, because it might at times lull us into believing that 1 is a very neutral number or it is a safe assumption. So a lot of us believe that by assuming that the beta is equal to 1, we are kind of in neutral territory. But what I want to highlight to you is that assuming that beta is equal to 1 is not an unbiased or a neutral stance, and in fact in several cases could really very deeply impact the resulted share value. And a lot of us might psychologically believe that by not making a beta is equal to 1 an assumption, one does not have to provide any justification, right? Even if you assume that beta is equal to 1, there has to be a reasonable amount of data to justify why you are assuming a beta is equal to 1. Okay. that somehow the magic of this number one is seems to be working on a lot of us. And what I've realized is even a small reduction of 0.3 or a change in 0.3 in the beta, I have seen leads to almost a 35 to 40% change in the share values that is there in the valuation report. And this is a very, very sizable number, right? So, in fact, recently I was going through even some category one merchant bankers reports included deeply somewhere in an Excel worksheet that they had assumed that beta is equal to 1. And since I was not privy to the backup workings, I hope there was a backup somewhere. Okay. Otherwise, my conclusion would be that this malady of assuming that beta is equal to 1 is something that really spreads wider and deeper than originally imagined. And for once, I was confused. So broad was this feeling that I thought I had to question myself: is my understanding correct or not? Did a lot of web research, read and reread Damodaran's presentations, ICI publications, and web research, only just to reassure myself that, when I'm saying that, beta is equal to 1 is not a neutral assumption, am I really correct or not? Okay. So coming to the basics, once again, the second part of the basics, this is something that all of us might have read in one of our very first lessons in financial management, that there is a total risk, and the total risk is split into business risk and financial risk. Broadly, what the business risk talks about is that for a rupee change or a unit change in revenue levels, what is the impact at an EBITDA level? And what we have learned is that this is primarily caused by the presence of fixed expenses within the operating cost structure. We also know it as operating leverage. The second aspect of it is what is called financial leverage, and this risk is caused by the presence of debt in the capital structure. And this is what we know as financial leverage. And we decompose business risk further to its component parts. What we know is a systematic and unsystematic risk. Systematic risk is what is non-diversifiable, which is what beta actually measures. And they're non-diversifiable because this risk cannot be reduced even by diversification of the portfolio. You can't reduce it by including one stock of the steel sector, one stock of consumer durables, one stock of IT, one stock of banking. This risk does not go away by diversification. And beta has been what measures this part of the risk. Alpha, which is the unsystematic or diversifiable risk, is traditionally not very interesting for finance people, because we believe that this risk can in any case be reduced by diversification. So why study it, right? From a graphical perspective, what it shows is that a portfolio, when diversified to approximately 15 to 20 securities, results in the diversifiable part of the risk being reasonably reduced. It doesn't become completely zero, but still reasonable part of it is reduced to such an extent that it is no longer interest us to study it, and we only need to study the beta that is there. From a mathematical formula perspective, operating leverage is percentage change in EBIT to percentage change in sales, and financial leverage is percentage change in EPS to percentage change in EBIT. So both together collectively work to create what is called a risk, that is, returns might deviate from the expected expectation of the investor. So this is one basic part, and this is how risk relates to beta. Hope this part is clear to everyone, and we might have refreshed some part of it. Now, going a little deeper, what does this beta itself comprise of, right? So there is one part of beta which is already present, which is there even in an unlevered firm. So even if a company were to be zero debt funded, there is still some part of the risk that is there, which we discussed in the previous slide, which is what the operating leverage is, what we were talking about. Now, Damodaran has got some very interesting dimensions to understanding this unlevered betas. And what he talks about is there are the more the discretionary part of the product or service, this operating leverage aspect also increases to the company. For example, what he says is a cyclical company should be having a higher beta than a non-cyclical ones because of the boom and bust cycles that this kind of companies are exposed to. Now, what he also talks about is that luxury goods should logically be having a higher beta than companies serving basic goods. For example, we all know that if a petrol pump shuts down, we see queues ahead of that petrol pump, and people are lining up to buy fuel. Whereas luxury goods like cosmetic jewelries and all, in case of, let's say, COVID-19 like situations where people cut down on spending, their revenues would go down drastically. So their operating leverage would go up, right? And then again, growth firms should also be having higher betas. Now, there's something that I had not read about, at least when I was doing my MBA or even my cost accounting, or none of the traditional financial texts include this dimension. And what they do actually include is the second box that we see here, that firms with higher proportion of fixed cost as a percentage of total operating costs will have a higher operating leverage, right? And whereas, yeah, so I'll just go back to the previous slide. So any questions on this? They are the determinants of beta. So let us say if we have been given the task of estimating beta for a particular target unlisted company, so a little bit of industry analysis is something that we'll have to do. As far as the mix of fixed cost versus variable cost is concerned, what Damodaran also agrees is this is information that is very, very confidential and internal. And generally, this part of information is not available to any analyst. And that is one of the reasons why in adjusting beta, we only focus on the financial leverage part and tend to ignore the operating leverage aspect of it. Of course, there's one more reason for that, which I will cover in my subsequent slide. But generally, what most analysts tend to do, and this is a worldwide practice, not just restricted to India or any other part of the world, that when we have the task in front of us to estimate the beta for an unlisted company, and let us say we have the industry average beta for that particular industry segment for which this company operates in, we tend to adjust for debt equity ratios, and unlevering and relevering is an aspect which handles that angle. The other logic why we do not include is that the third and the fourth bullets part, in a perfect world, we would also adjust for operating leverage, but the main hurdle here is the availability of fixed and variable costs split amongst firms in the industry. This is typical internal analysis that only management accountants who would be doing the analysis would be privy to, right? So due to these factors, and also one more reason is that logic that within the same industry, there are certain given structures required to operate. For example, in the steel industry or cement industry, there are certain factors which are common across all companies that operate in the industry, which impact everyone. For example, capex intensity, transportation costs, power dependency, raw material sources, etc. These are common to all players. If you're operating in the cement industry, these aspects impact all companies. So these factors are unlikely to impact companies differently that are operating within a given single industry. So this is one more reason that one is okay making an assumption that operating leverage might be similar to all companies that are operating in the industry, so we can kind of ignore it. But whereas financial leverage is something that will clearly vary from company to company. Some companies might be more relying on debt in their capital structure than others. And this is also visible in the form of debt equity ratios, which is clearly publicly available information. Correct?
So, Braido,
yeah.
Can I raise a question to you? On your previous slide, what you mentioned is, I mean, this slide, and then if I look back to the previous slide, you're saying first calculate an industry level beta, and then after that, then probably adjust for younger companies based upon the age of the companies, which is at the bottom of your slide, or else based upon the size of the company, you adjust the beta. That's what you're saying, right? Just for my clarity.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, these are two factors which one has to keep in mind when one is trying to estimate the beta for the target company.
Mhm. Right. So first calculate industry beta and then adjust it for the size or the age of the company, is what you're saying.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And will you be able to tell us how to do that also in the course of things, in the course of the presentation?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
I'll
Thank
tell you
you.
that. I'll tell you
Right. Thanks.
that. Okay. Yeah. And in case I'm going too fast, please let me know. Okay. Please feel free to stop me anywhere. Okay. Now, so as a result of these two slides, how one can summarize both of these is that as a result of the industry analysis, we might uh, uh, arrive at what can be considered as an average industry level beta. Okay, we have to then adjust for individual factors like size, maturity, or growth stage of the company. Okay, and then arrive at some estimate of what the beta should be for the target company. I have an Excel file in which I will show you how I have done that for a target company. Okay, so having done that, uh, let's come briefly dwell with what is really different in the case of an unlisted company, and that too for startups. Most of us might have dealt with situations where there is a startup which is um, obviously is unlisted, but an additional problem that we might also come across in the case of startups is it might be operating in a certain segment of the industry which might be very, very unique. For example, the target company that I'll be dealing with is a company that is dealing in the artificial intelligence space. Okay. Now, not only is artificial intelligence an area which has got very, very broad applications. AI could be used in healthcare. AI could be used in media and entertainment. AI could be used in practically every single aspect of business. So if you have a company, a startup, which is operating the AI space, what kind of industries do you go to in order to find appropriate benchmarks is the first question, right? And then, of course, the second is that even across listed companies, you are seldom you seldom come across companies that have 100% AI in their revenues. As we know, that lot of existing large listed companies are also venturing into this AI space, but the proportion of AI as a percentage of their revenues could be very small. In large companies, even the large companies might be having 5% or 10% or 20% or 25% of their revenues coming from AI space, but 75% of the revenues could be coming from traditional areas. And there's a startup company which is getting 100% of its revenues. So this obviously impacts the risk profile of the company, because at the end of the day, there are adoption kind of risks, right? The technology that this company is working on could fail. So how do you adjust for that factor is also one more aspect that must be given due consideration to, and may also need to be documented in the valuation report. Uh, the problem that I faced was that because this company is operating in the software space and is a software product company, uh, if you get into moneycontrol.com, the product versus services split is not there when the publicly traded company's data is provided. Only size is available. And that too, size is something that I had to personally do in the calculation. It is not publicly available. Okay. So let's see how I have dealt with that. Any questions on this slide? So either everybody's understood or nothing has been understood.
Yeah, no, I think that we are okay.
Okay.
It's just interesting that you put in that one point, which is that how to find out the companies which are comparable. So
Yeah, correct.
comparability, I think Sanjay Shah is also saying the same thing. Comparability is the key. How to find those companies which are comparable is the most difficult bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in this aspect, let me tell you that you cannot rule out subjectivity. Okay. So a certain amount of subjectivity and judgment aspect do come into play here. We cannot rule that out. And primarily the root cause of that is a lack of availability of data. Okay. Primarily it is that aspect. Okay. So maybe what we can do is that all of you might kind of have additional questions as we completely go through advance further in this presentation. Let me also do a brief time check. Okay, done about 25 minutes of my presentation. Okay, now here is what I did. Now for this company in the AI space, the first step that I did is I did a web search. Okay, and what I did is that I did a Google search of, let's say, listed AI companies in India. Okay, now that search drew a blank. Okay, I did not find any. I found a lot of startups that are coming up and a list of companies that were startups in India who are working in the AI space, but unfortunately, none of them were listed. Okay, but what it did throw up is a bunch of listed companies in NASDAQ who are working in the AI space. Okay, now that might bring in an additional complication element, that how do you factor in, is there any difference if I were to, let's say, refer to a bunch of companies which are not listed in India but listed abroad? Do we have to adjust for that aspect? And if yes, how do we do that? Okay. So I went to basically moneycontrol.com, and within moneycontrol.com also there are list of IT companies, and there's a different groups of companies in IT also. There are IT services, there are small, there are large, different kind of companies are there. Okay, so this IT services consulting.html, I went onto this. Okay, this Excel has been enclosed here. I will refer to that Excel shortly. Okay, and then what I did is that a lot of these companies, you find betas. You go to individual companies, you find betas, and let report betas for both BSE and NSE. And typically, what one finds is that the NSE traded volume is typically at least 3 to 4 times more than the BSE listed companies. So wherever BSE listed prices are available, I've used beta there. But in the case of some companies where, let's say, the trading volumes are less, and this typically is the case for smaller companies, if only BSE listed prices are available and BSE beta is available, I've used beta from BSE. Okay, and what I've also done is that you also need the debt equity ratios, because as we saw, we also have to adjust for the debt equity ratios, and then you drill down to the financials of those companies and go to the financial ratios. Okay, and in the financial ratios, you go to the debt equity ratio, and also I also jotted down 2 other ratios of EV to net operating revenues, as you can see here, and EV to EBITDA ratios. So they are the 3 data that I found out. Let me go to that Excel file now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I may have to share this Excel also, right? Can you?
You'll have to stop sharing the screen and then share the Excel.
I've stopped sharing it
and share the Excel.
And share my Excel now. Can you see my Excel?
Yes.
Okay. So when I went to moneycontrol.com, typically, I hope all of you can see this screen.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So now basically what this URL that I'm showing at the moneycontrol.com stocks IT services consulting Excel, as you can see, this is thrown up some 66 odd companies which are there. Okay. Now what I did is you first have to copy this, copy paste in a notepad, and then recopy that into Excel. It gives these 4 columns. Now these are additional columns that I added thereafter. So what I did is that up to, let's say, 10,000 crore of revenues, I've classified them as large. Okay. From 10,000 crores revenue to 1,000 crore and above, I classified them as mid but stage 1. Okay, mid 1. Then from 1,000 crores to, let's say, something like 100 crores odd. Okay, I classified them as mid 2. And then there's a small category, there's a small company, and this is the class of companies in which the startup that for which I have to do my valuation comes in. I saw the forecasted financials, and over a period of 5 to 6 years, their turnover was not exceeding 100 crores. They were around 105 to 110 crores, right? So this, in all likelihood, is the size of the segment of that industry that I have to work with. So Abraham, this kind of answers your question, that how to handle size. Okay.
Okay.
So when I look at, let me just kind of, where I got the, yeah, if I click on this link also, okay, it takes me to this site. So this is basically the, I might have to stop sharing and share this again. Let me share my desktop instead. I hope the desktop sharing option is share. How do you share desktop advanced portion of the screen, contents and files? Okay, no. Okay, let's come back to share screen. Can you see my screen here?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, but I think if I were to kind of click on a link, I hope it is available once again. So let's say suppose I click on signed. Okay.
Yeah, we
Can
can
you
see.
still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So on this, if you see this beta here that is available here at 0.61, correct?
Right.
Right. So this is where I picked up the beta from. Okay. And again, further, if I click on financials and go to, let's say, ratios, right? I hope my screen is still available. You can see
Yes.
the screen.
Yes.
Okay. So here in the financial ratios, what I'm saying is I can see that for March 20, I take a look, I get this consolidated, click on this consolidated, and it's consolidated here. What I see is first, I see the debt equity ratio here. So I see 0.15 debt equity ratio for Cyient. Okay. So this is the number that I pick up for the debt equity ratio of Cyient. I picked up the beta, I picked up the debt equity ratio, and then I picked up these ratios of enterprise value to net operating revenue, enterprise value to EBITDA. They're the values that I picked up. Like this, I have kind of summarized these values in the values. Okay, I think I might have made a mistake here in this sense. I might have looked at the standalone, I have picked up the standalone figures, 0.62 and all. So this is one has to kind of audit one's own figures once again, maybe take an assistant and do that part. Okay, so this is the way I have picked up the betas and the EV to net operating revenue and EV to EBITDA ratios also for all these 66 companies. And then what I've done here is I have done a median calculation for the large company, median for mid one, median for mid two, and median for small companies.
Okay, you're going back to your Excel now?
Yeah, okay. I have to kind of stop sharing and I think in Microsoft Teams or something, the factor of sharing desktop is available.
Yeah, that's in Meet.
Yeah,
But
okay. So let me kind of share this once again. Just a minute. No, where is it gone?
Sir.
Yeah. Okay, share screen. I come back to Excel. Okay, there it is.
There are some questions from participants also, so you just take it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please. I'm not. You can ask. Yeah.
Yeah. At times, the client themselves give us the competitors list.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of the competitors are in foreign country, and some of the competitors are unlisted.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So, will that point also be covered? How to find the betas in that case?
See, if it is listed, that is not a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's in US or foreign country.
Yeah, I have, for example, in this Excel here, you can see how the beta has been calculated even for, let's say, NASDAQ companies here. I've done that. Okay. But for if the client has given a list of unlisted companies, that becomes a little tough. Okay. Because that data would not be available if the client can also make you available, or if there is some way in which you can make available. For example, in India, this company, this zobacorp.com is there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, from zobacorp.com, I think for an amount of 500 rupees, if you pay, you'll be able to get all the filed documents with the ROC for even that unlisted company. Okay, so at least you can get some uh, filed data even for the unlisted company. You can use that. Okay.
Projections will not be available in that case.
Yeah, correct. But for a listed company, even on US, for example, in this case, I've taken the NASDAQ data for listed companies, and we can definitely factor in the figures for those companies there. Okay.
Okay.
So just quickly come down to the Indian companies. What I've done is that after I've classified the large, median, mid one, mid two, and small, I've calculated the median beta values for the small company. This 0.32 is the figure that I have used. Okay, but then again, this beta might also be for. I also calculated the median debt equity ratio for the small companies. Okay, so what one can see is, I hope you can see my screen, correct? So what this
Yes.
shows is that the median of 0.32 is a beta for small IT companies in India, and their median debt equity ratio is 0.08. Okay. Now this target company for which I have to estimate beta in its financial forecast was showing a debt equity ratio of 0. Okay. So it means I can't take 0.32 as the beta for this company. I have to kind of unlever this. Okay. So for unlevering, the simple formula that is being used is beta of an unlevered company is the beta of a levered company divided by 1 plus brackets open 1 minus tax rate into the average debt equity ratio. Okay. Now, because there is a list of almost 29 companies in this small and small category, I can't kind of go about calculating the individual tax rate for each one of them. Okay, so what I've done is that I've assumed the average tax rate of 25.17%, which is the effective tax rate after the tax rate reductions. Okay, and I've calculated, if you can see the formula here, 1 plus 1 minus 0.2517 into the debt equity ratio of 0.08. Okay, this formula and this working, I hope, is visible to everyone.
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah, so this gives us that for an unlevered company, which is in the category of small companies, okay, the unlevered beta for such a company would be 0.301926. Now this forms one input to my calculation. This is what I will use for the unlisted startup company, because for companies of comparable size, after adjusting for the debt equity ratio, this looks like what would be a reasonable beta to be assumed. Correct?
So the question which Joy has is, why would you use median rather than average? Is there any logic to that, or is that
Yeah, see,
suffice?
because statistically, the mean is typically impacted by certain very large values. Okay. For example, if you have, let's say, 29 companies, and amongst these 29 companies, let's say there are 2 companies who got a very large beta, for example, and the rest of the 27 companies have got smaller ones, right? So the median as a statistical measure is less impacted, in fact, is not impacted by a few adverse, by a few outliers, whereas a mean tends to be impacted by a few abnormally larger, abnormally small values. That's the reason why we would prefer median instead of a mean.
Yeah. So one more observation here then, Subbarayu, is that, see, when you look at the beta, then for large companies it's 0.73, whereas for small companies it's going down to 0.32. So the beta is actually dropping for the smaller companies, right? That's for this sector, at least it looks like that's the conclusion.
Yeah.
Or is it a valid conclusion, or is it not? What's the thinking?
Yeah, it's somewhat counterintuitive. Okay, I would also have expected that perhaps smaller companies should be having larger beta values. Okay, what I could think of is that it perhaps might also be as a result of the fact that the smaller companies might be thinly traded, might not be very frequently traded also. Is that factor impacting this? Is something that was there at the back of my mind as well. However, this factor is, there's still one step to be left, because this was of the Indian companies. Okay. there's still the Nasdaq companies that I have to cover. I'll come back to this question, Ibrahim, once I come back to my final step. Okay.
Sure thing. There are a lot of questions which are there in the chat box also, which you have a look at from time to time.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Some of the people can kind of just ask the questions verbally. Yeah. Please go
Hello.
ahead. Yeah.
Sir, Harshad here.
Yeah.
See, now the unlevered beta for small companies we have calculated comes to 0.3.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Correct.
when I'm using it for the company which is startup,
Yeah.
so we have to. It must be in tandem with the market, no? So can I use this beta for, or I have to adjust the DLOC or DLOM here?
Yeah. See, but DLOC and DLOM is a last step that you do after you calculated the fair value without those discounts.
Correct.
Right. That will come at a subsequent stage, but you will not use it at the time of beta. Okay. So because first you estimate beta, then you'll calculate weighted average cost of capital.
Correct.
Then use that weighted average cost of capital to discount your DCFs. Correct.
Yes.
And after you've calculated the present value, you'll divide by the number of shares and arrive at a fair value. Correct.
Okay.
And then as a last step, you'll DLOC and DLOM you'll use at that stage.
Okay. No, but can we use this 0.3 beta for the startup companies, since they have got the they are more risky as compared to because this data these large, medium and mid small.
I'll just ask you to hold on to your question till then, because I still have to do the Nasdaq listed companies part. Okay. And I found a significantly large variation between this and that. Okay. So what I've done is that I've assigned a certain weightage to this and a certain weightage to the Nasdaq part. Okay. And in giving a larger weightage to the Nasdaq, I've factored in all of these aspects that you've asked. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now this was for the Indian companies part. Okay. Now, if I briefly return to my, let us say the PPT once again. Okay. I will stop sharing and let me kind of share my PPT once again. Okay, there we are. Yeah. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Visible? Okay. Now this completes one leg of the beta estimation, where I have considered the Indian listed companies part and tried to estimate what would the beta be for a small company in India. But what I was also not kind of satisfied with this part. The primary reason was that, as I said, as far as the revenue mix is concerned, I knew that in the Indian companies, the proportion of artificial intelligence AI-based revenues as a percentage of total revenues for these companies was not all that significant. The good part of it is when I look at this particular site, the builtin.com or AI publicly traded AI companies, okay, I saw that a significant part of the revenues, and this included a lot of small tech companies which are doing a lot of high-end work in AI. So I could, by using my judgment, feel that these are the bunch of companies which are better benchmarks to the startup than the Indian companies. Okay, so this link threw up 10 companies. So some had very large revenues in $1 billion, but business lines somewhat similar to the target company. These companies I included in my list. Okay, some of them are very large with AI component only furthering existing businesses or targeting new business areas, which is not very similar to that of a target company. I did not include those companies, right? And some are startups with their AI being targeted at industry used in similar industries. These companies were included. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. Now, interestingly, so far I had referred to Ashwat Damodaran's presentation. There's a good document of about 92 slides there, which maybe I'll share after this presentation. But interestingly, if you go to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India's publications of these professional insights, the series 3, Ibrahim, included one particular topic in computing beta, the most critical input to CAPM. Okay, that's a very interesting read. I would recommend all of you read that. And one section of that I have placed it here. Okay, so what this says that this details out how to take a particular target company's listed share prices, compare it to, let's say, a BSE Sensex or a Nasdaq composite index, and calculate beta for that particular company. And briefly what it says is that the covariance of X and Y divided by the variance of Y, where X is the particular stock return and Y is the index return, can give you an effective way of calculating beta for that particular company. But obviously this approach can only be applied to listed companies. So if you see in my previous slide, because all of these companies were listed companies, I adopted that approach, okay, to all those companies that I decided to include. I'll come to this. This summarizes those companies of the NASDAQ listed companies that I decided to include. After this, I'll briefly jump into that Excel and show you the precise calculations that I did. So there are those 10 companies: Veritone, NVIDIA, Splunk, Synopsys, Salesforce, QuickLogic, Netflix, John Deere, Google, and BrainChip. Okay, this is the NASDAQ symbol. This is the turnover that I extracted from NASDAQ financials. If you could see in millions of dollars, $49 million, $10 billion, $2.3 billion, $3.3 billion, $17 billion, $10 million, $20 billion, $39 million, $160 billion. BrainChip, I could not, it seems the symbol was wrong, so I could not include this. Okay. Now, I also looked at the nature of the business that was described in these companies. Reading this nature of business, I'll kind of quickly rush through this because I'm also kind of finding short of time, and there's something that PPT I'll again share. There's a logic that I've used to arrive at a conclusion as to whether this has been included in my sample to average out the beta or not. And this is something that I'll document as part of my evaluation report so that it becomes transparent as to what is the logic that I've considered for either including or excluding that company. But I summarized that logic in my previous slide. Okay. So now these included companies, I'll go back to the Excel now. I'll kind of stop sharing this. Let me go back to the Excel and show you the precise calculation that I did there. Okay. I'll again share my screen and go back to this, Excel. Okay. Can you see this screen now? Excel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now in this, what I've done is, let me come back to the NASDAQ. Yeah, okay. So here what I've done is to kind of, okay, this is the NASDAQ historical returns. This I extracted from NASDAQ site itself, okay? So date-wise, historical returns have been extracted. And then step by step, I've extracted the historical stock data for each of these 5 selected companies that I decided to include, okay? And then simply using a VLOOKUP function, I brought all the data comparable in one single tab, okay? So I have, this is basically the Y that we talk about. This is the X that we talk about. Even the ICAI's document also talks about. So I have X and Y, and I have 5 sets of data, okay? So I can use the covariance of Veritone company divided by the variance of X. Likewise, for each one of these companies, I have computed beta for all the 5 companies, okay? If you can see the formula here, okay? So I've used the covariance of the Veritone data with NASDAQ returns to calculate the beta for Veritone. You can see the formula here. Covariance of column G, which is the NASDAQ return, with the share price of Veritone, divided by the variance for Veritone stock price data. This gives you the beta for Veritone. Likewise, the beta for QuickLogic, Synopsys, NVIDIA, and Splunk. But importantly, I still don't know. For some of these companies, could be debt funded. Using a similar approach as I did for the Indian companies, I went into the financials and computed the debt equity ratios for each of these companies. These 2 companies happen to be 0 debt equity. These companies are debt funded. There is some debt. Splunk in particular is almost 1:1 debt equity ratio. And using their financials, also the P&Ls, I calculated their effective tax ratios. Basically what I did here is the tax expense as a result of earnings before tax. That percentage is the tax rates. Similar formula that I've used here, okay? Unlevered beta. So the unlevered beta has been calculated for each one of these companies here, okay? So I got 1.29, 1.643 here because the levered and unlevered are the same. But in these companies, we have the change here. For example, the levered beta is 0.92, unlevered is 0.9. NVIDIA 1.59, levered is 1.38. And what we can see here, and then I took this, all of this to a summary sheet, okay? This perhaps is not kind of relevant for our discussion right now. I'll kind of hide this. So what I did is I have the revenue here and I have the betas here for all of these, and these are the unlevered betas. So what I have is weighted average unlevered beta for all of these companies works out to 1.2027, right? As against 0.3 there, I have 1.2 here, which is a huge difference here, correct? Now, we have the question here, what to do? Okay, what to do here with that? Now, what do we do? Now, if I return back to my presentation, let me stop share here, and again, let me start sharing let me come back to the PPT. Yeah. Okay. Now, lot of your questions that you asked here, now what do we do? Now, I have to decide, I have two betas. One is an unlevered beta, which is kind of 0.3 for Indian companies, and an unlevered beta 1.2 for Nasdaq listed company. I have to decide how much of a weightage do I give to both of them. Now here all of these aspects come. Number one factor is because the US listed companies had a business which seemed to be more in line with the kind of the business that this startup had. More specifically, the proportion of AI revenues that seemed to be much bigger for the US listed company than for the Indian company. That was one factor that prompted me to give a much higher weightage to the Nasdaq listed companies as compared to the Indian ones, correct? So I decided to give 75% weightage to Nasdaq and 25% weightage to the Indian companies. There's some element of subjectivity, no doubt out here. Okay, and also the Indian companies are more or less tend to have a more service-driven model than a product-driven model. So as one of you raised this question, obviously the product-driven companies have got a much bigger risk than a services-driven companies. And perhaps this factor was reflected in the higher beta in the Nasdaq companies than for the Indian ones. Perhaps Indian companies have still not adequately priced in the risk as aspect that is their product companies. So using all of this, I arrived at a weighted average of 0.9775 beta here. Now, some of you might say, hey, but this is also close to 1, right? So does this mean that the one assumption of beta was right, was justified? I would
That's
say
what I was
no.
just about going to ask you that.
I would say, even if it is, the fact is that we have a numbers-driven, numbers-based calculated justification to back up our assumption that we are taking a 0.97 or 98 beta. This 0.98 beta is not an assumption that has been made assuming that 1 is a neutral figure. Okay, right? And Abraham and everyone, to be practical, in this particular engagement, I was given a number and I had to update a fair value of a fair value that had already been done about 6 months or 8 months ago. So I was kind of constrained in the sense that I had this constraint of not deviating very much from a past calculated figure. That's a very, very practical item that I'm sharing with all of you. I don't know whether it's right or not. Okay. But had this been a first time valuation exercise, I would have perhaps used a 90% weightage to Nasdaq and only a 10% weightage to Indian. And if I use a 0.9 and 0.1, the beta that I was using was coming to something like 1.13, and I would have used that. Okay. Now I'm kind of open to questions, please. All kind of questions that people want to ask. I'm saying 25. Please ask whatever question that you may want to ask.
So there are a number of questions in the chat box which you can just have a look.
Yeah, let me just go through the something that's okay. Okay, chat here. Okay. Some of them needs to 3-year betas. I feel 1 year is too short, well 5 years is too long. Sites such as Yahoo. Yeah, I mean, so these are all whether 1 year or 5 year. One might also have to use some judgment here as to whether 3 year is likely to be more volatile or 5 years likely to be more volatile. But broadly, using a longer time span might kind of give us a broad time span to average out any unusual fluctuation that one might have used in a shorter time frame. Okay. Somebody, Joy Jain, Professor Damodaran says that particularly for beta, we should use averages rather than median. I please share that part of the Damodaran there, because I have a PPT, I have a PDF file, a 92 slide um, PDF that Damodaran has shared. Broadly speaking, depends upon what is the skewness present in your data. What one can do is, let us say you have the data of, let's say, 50 companies. One can quickly do a skewness test. If you see that your data is presenting a skew, either significantly, skewness might vary between -1 and +1. Okay, if the data, yeah, if the skewness is not very broad, one might be good enough using either mean or median. But if the skewness is there, I would insist that please use median and not mode and not mean. Okay. Decilan unlevered to levered calculation require debt to equity only, and not debt upon debt plus equity. Please confirm that. Yes, I would agree there. I also use the same thing, debt to equity only, not on debt divided debt plus equity. Correct. That is there. Rajesh Yanamandaram, if valuation is done for Indian company, if no comparable, whether we can consider foreign company listed. Yes, absolutely. I feel yes, because one has to find out which, by the nature of the company, revenue composition, and the kind of markets that it addresses, which is more comparable, is the predominant question here. And what I've seen is that in Indian scenario, as you could see this particular example, there were no comparable in the Indian listed space at all. So rather than Indian or foreign, it is the nature of the business that makes sense. And personally, my opinion is, which is a more perfect market is also an important question. I feel NASDAQ or even NYSE might be a more mature market where, in case there are more scams or scandals or market imperfections in terms of, information asymmetry. My own personal view is the law enforcement cycle in the way of weeding out and meting out punishment to any scams or scandals, that cycle turns quicker in the US market than it does in the Indian market. Correct. So my personal view is that the US market is far more older, far more broader and mature than our own Indian stock market. And that is one more reason why I would prefer to use the US market data than Indian market data. The only instance that I would use Indian data is, in case you find a company which is very similar to the target company, which is listed in the Indian market, that could be a good justification to consider the Indian market instead of the US market. So in my opinion, rather than Indian or US, Indian or foreign, the deciding factor is, if you found a company with a revenue profile, customer profile, and a business profile that is close to the target company. If you can find such a company which is there in the Indian markets, number one preference would be the Indian market. But if you don't find such a company and you find a similar company in the US market, please go ahead and use the US market. Don't be influenced by the US versus foreign aspect there. Abraham, you have any view on that?
No, there are some views on the chat box, and Shilpa wants to say something.
I have a different doubt. So once we finish this, I'll raise that.
Okay, fine. About the Indian market, okay, fine. Ashwat Damodaran dataset displays unlevered, levered, and also cash adjusted beta. Cash adjusted beta is generally 5 times more than unlevered beta. How relevant is cash adjusted beta? No, I'm not aware of what this cash adjusted beta is. Are you saying that in the calculation of enterprise value, you have to reduce cash and cash equivalents? Is that what you mean, Dailison?
Actually, in that database of Mr. Ashwat Damodaran, one heading will be there, cash adjusted beta. So I think his question was on that aspect. Should we take that?
So I think if cash adjusted beta refers to, because in the formula for enterprise value, what we do is that the enterprise value of a company would be, market capitalization plus market value, which is basically market cap of equity plus market value of debt, less cash and cash equivalents. that might be that, then definitely yes, we should do that. We should do that aspect.
I have a different question.
Yeah.
Suppose we require beta to input that in CAPM model and arrive at the cost of equity.
Yeah.
Okay, suppose we from Ashwath Damodaran website, we already have the industry's cost of equity. Can I straight use that cost of equity instead of taking beta and then arriving at risk-free return plus risk premium applicable?
No. See, because if Ashwath Damodaran said give you the cost of equity, okay, what you have to use is the weighted average cost of capital. Okay, so you would have to also calculate the cost of debt. Okay, so cost of equity and cost of debt weighted to the proportion of equity and debt is what the weighted average cost of capital for the firm is going to be, and that is what you have to use in your to discount your cash flows.
But is that permissible? Because generally we go for CAPM beta. This is the normal way we use. Can we even use that?
No, you should not do that. You should not do that. See, because cost of equity is only one component of the overall weighted average cost of capital. And you have to discount your future stream of cash flows at the weighted average cost of capital and not merely only the cost of equity.
Depending on what base you're using. If you're using free cash flow to shareholders, then you can do cost of equity.
No, but then why would you use only free cash flow to equity shareholders is my question. See, basically, if you're using, let's say, assume you're using the income approach, okay, right? So in the income approach, you would have, let's say, 5 years or 7 years series of estimated cash flows to the firm, correct? Post-tax cash flows are there, right? So your starting point should be the free cash flows to the firm, and then use a weighted average cost of capital. That is the way it should be done.
So if you exclude from the cash flows to the firm the cash flows to debt, which is basically interest,
okay,
then you'll arrive at cash flows to the shareholders.
Okay, yeah.
And then you can arrive at value of the firm to the equity shareholders.
No, if you were to do that, you would only arrive at the value of equity. No, let's say if you are discounting free cash flows to equity holders, okay, by the cost of equity, okay, how do you arrive at the value of the firm in totality?
Yeah, so the value of the firm then is the value of the debt which you can arrive separately. But I was only listening to Shilpa's point.
Okay.
About I had a similar question, so I mean.
Okay, then perhaps Shilpa, I think I've understood what you're saying. Perhaps what you're saying is, if you have been given the task of finding the fair value of a share of the company, then you are using fair value, free cash flows to equity holders, okay, and capitalizing that by using the cost of equity to arrive at the fair value of the share. Correct? Correct. Yeah. In that case, yes. In that case, what you're arriving at is the the fair value of the equity share. Correct. But I'm not sure. I mean, I would prefer to use in order to calculate the fair value of the share. I would prefer to discount the FCFF, free cash flow to the firm, by the overall firm's weighted average cost of capital and divide by the total number of shares of the company to arrive at the fair value of the share.
Sir Subbarayadu sir, I mean, just to paraphrase paraphrase Shilpaji's question, computing the cost of equity by using CAPM model and using betas. Instead of that, the Ashwath Damodaran website also contains cost of equity, which is there for industry-specific cost of equity. So once we've identified the industry-specific cost of equity, instead of computing the cost of equity using the beta CAPM model, can we directly take the industry-specific equity?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Thanks for bringing that to my notice. My other answer to that question, Shilpa, is you still have to adjust the industry specific beta to your company. Okay, there could be significant differences between the beta at an industry and beta at a company level. You cannot leave that step aside. Okay, for various reasons, the firm's beta and the industry beta could vary. Okay, so you cannot directly use an industry level beta to the firm, and in case you are doing that, please make sure that you give at least include a paragraph to justify why you believe that the industry level beta can directly be used for the firm. I mean, there must be some characteristics of the firm which are very, very similar to that of the industry. Only in that case can you use it as it is, but otherwise you have to adjust it for the firm. That would be my answer. Uttam, I hope your question has been answered, right? And Shilpa?
Perfect, sir. Perfect, sir.
So, would I to add a question? This is just to elaborate a little more on Shilpa's point. So I'm just generalizing.
Yeah.
So, see, there are various methods. Now, let's say we use from Damodaran cost of equity for the industry, then we tweak it for small company and so on. Okay. So my doubt, which has not gone away, is that supposing there is a review saying that how did you use this?
Okay.
Where would you, and you documented that I took it from Damodaran, I adjusted for small capital. This is zero debt, so I don't think return, and probably a subjective thing also, that this is a new area and therefore I feel the beta should be a little higher and so on. My question is, will that pass scrutiny, and how are we to determine what passes scrutiny or no? No, this is a very general question.
Okay. In fact, just to I'll just get back to Shilpa's question once more, and to which I think Uttam also drew my attention to, and to some extent it addresses your question also, Naren. Can you see my Excel screen here? Yeah. So Shilpa, Uttam, one more aspect. See, because if let us say Ashwath Damodaran publish an industry average cost of equity, okay, one must also, you can't ignore the industry average debt equity ratio also, correct? See, if the industry average cost of equity, let's say 0.32, but if industry average debt equity ratio is 0.08, you still have to unlever it, right? So that is one adjustment that you still would have to do before you arrive at company specific cost of equity as well. Okay, so this is that adjustment in any case you have to do, Shilpa. So the list of factors for which you have to address in coming down from industry to your individual firm, to some extent depends upon what data it throws up and what is the information about the startup company that you have. Right, and it would not be possible for me to come up with an exhaustive list of all of those things, but so to come back to your question, Naren, what is the list of factors that you would have to adjust to depends upon what are the known facts, correct? So, I mean, one line answer would be you have to adjust for all the known facts that are there in front of you, okay? So if you can demonstrate that these 8 to 9 were the known facts that are there in front of me, and this is how I have adjusted for each one of those known facts, okay, then at least an independent reviewer would be able to conclude that, okay, this guy has adjusted for all the known facts and has not done something in ignorance. I think, in my opinion, if at the time of review, it comes out that, hey, this guy was ignorant, that might invite some possible, adverse remarks. For example, blindly assuming that a beta is equal to 1 might invite some adverse remarks. But if you, for example, even here, even at the end of all those adjustments, we might have still come back to a number which is close to 1, right? But I don't see that in this situation, any adverse remarks. At most, what could the reviewer say? Why have you used 75% to NASDAQ and 25% weight to Indian? Why not 90-10, right? Then you can also counter a question that you tell me why 90-10, why not 75-25, right? That is his opinion versus your opinion. At least there are no objective factors on the basis of which the reviewer could get to you. Correct?
Okay. No, I agree. And I think that seems very fair.
Yeah.
So there might be different approaches.
Right.
But as long as the main factors have been considered, I suppose it should pass. So for example, I mean, on this particular data, it seems very counterintuitive that the beta is 0.32.
Yeah.
So let us say I use an alternative for a small company. Okay.
Yeah.
I take the small cap mutual fund.
Okay.
And I find out what is the variation in that. Now, if you look at small cap, in the on the market, the beta or the especially when there's a downside, the fall, the variation is much more.
Correct.
For the small cap.
Right.
Very heavily. So let us say I use some macro factor like that, meaning I use small cap mutual fund, calculate the beta of that, and then I adjust it to the industry, this one. So there could be different approaches. I'm not suggesting that.
No, but with a small cap mutual fund, Naren, my main objection would be that because small cap mutual fund could be industry across diverse industry segments. Correct. For example,
I got your point. So I'm saying I will use small cap for the beta of small caps. I will use beta of industry for beta of industry. Now I'm quite aware that this is a little, what shall I say, macro level, and is not fine tuning to the specific company and all that. But supposing we do this kind of tweaking, therefore then you have considered all the factors. Say, let's say there's 6-7 factors you need to consider.
Okay, there's just one more factor. There's one more factor which I think. The point is the mutual fund itself would have been investing in a lot of individual companies, correct? And those individual companies might also be exposed to different levels of financial leverages, correct?
Yeah.
So you've not adjusted for leverage differentials, right? If you have to do that approach, and if you want to do that, you would have to go to that mutual fund's portfolio and see which all companies have that mutual fund invested in, and those portfolio companies, what is their debt equity ratio, and then again to unlever all of that, correct? So there's an additional step you still have to do, correct?
Yeah. So you will do all that, but my point is that's a different approach. I'm not going to Nasdaq. I'm not going to this thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a feel that as long as you've done some due diligence, you have listed the factors, you've taken care of all of them. You see, in these things, there's nothing known as a perfect right or anything. So. Therefore,
I just have to mention one thing, that it is important, particularly at the time of an external review, that have the known factors been adjusted for is the important question. Okay. If the known factors, for example, let us say the different leverage levels is definitely a known factor, correct? If no matter what your starting point is, even if your starting point is, let's say, a small cap mutual fund, okay. Have you adjusted for A, industry differentials? Have you adjusted for B, differing leverage levels is the important question. As long as you have done that step, I think it is okay.
Okay. Right.
Okay. But if one of these steps have been skipped, for example, let's say you have adjusted for industry level but not adjusted for leverage levels, that may be an issue. You have adjusted for leverage level but not adjusted for industry differentials, that could also be an issue. Correct.
Right.
A third could be that in the last step that you mentioned, after having adjusted for industry differentials and let us say leverage differentials within the small cap, you're adjusting finally for, let us say, that specific industry to which this startup relates to. Okay. In that step, once again, let's say large and small differentials have been skipped. Okay. So because even in that level, you have to again adjust for those factors once again, correct?
Yeah, sure.
So broadly, the question is, have known factors been adjusted for or not? That is one single sentence question. If the answer is yes, I think you would pass the muster. If no, then maybe at least some queries may be raised.
Right.
Yeah.
As a time check, Subraidu, I'll just ask Shilpa also. See, even though we are having our other speaker on and he will probably start shortly, I think that members can still continue to send messages, and Subraidu, you will answer them in the chat box, right?
Sure. Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
I would request Kusum to convey vote of thanks to Mr. Subraidu.
Very good morning to all the attendees of this Zoom meeting, and it is my pleasure this morning to give a vote of thanks to Mr. Subraidu. Mr. Subraidu, we're very thankful for deliberating on a very important topic this morning. You started off this morning by stating the basic assumptions of WACC. You said that the WACC estimation is one of the most important aspects in conducting a valuation. And in arriving at this, there are stated as well as unstated assumptions. You also spoke about the total risk, which is the business risk as well as the financial risk in any company. Whereas financial risk, which is the operating risk, which is arising because of presence of debt in the capital structure, and this is what most valuers focus on. There are certain aspects that the valuers also do not take into consideration, which is the business risk, which is which has a systematic as well as unsystematic risk. You also spoke about a whole lot of things relating to how to go about estimating a beta in an unlisted company, and you told us step-by-step method approaches that one needs to follow in order to arrive at the beta. You start off with arriving at the industry level beta, and then adjust it for all things such as the firm size and also other operating leverages. You also told us about important reference materials that we need to take into consideration, which is the ICAI publication, more particularly the series 3, which talks about how to compute the beta, as well as Ashwath Damodaran. I think it has been a very, very useful and an important session that we have had this morning, and I'm very sure that all the attendees who have participated in this session find it very useful. We will be grateful if you could share the presentation with us, and we wish you the very best, Mr. Subraidu. Now that we understand that you have plenty of years of experience and vast, industry experience, and we are very, very impressed with your qualification as well. We wish you the very best in your entrepreneurial approach, because I am particularly impressed with the name of the entity that you have. So from all of us, the attendees and the organizers, we are very thankful to you and wishing you the very best. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, can we start the next session, Mr. Chinmay?
Or we'll take a short break and then start.
Yeah, shall we resume at 10?
Sure, Shilpa. Maybe 10 to I'll come. We have an Anthem at office. I'm sitting in office. At 10 to I'll come after finishing that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thanks all. We'll resume at 10.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, if anyone has questions, maybe you can either ask either verbally. I'm still around to.
Subraidu.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. This is Ganesh Ramani.
Yeah.
My understanding is when you search for, please correct me, when you search for artificial intelligence and trying to narrow down, I think if you look at the fundamental part of beta is essentially nothing but the return that you were to generate vis-a-vis the market.
Correct.
And that's where it starts. So here, the reason why one says there's a variation in the returns is because of the sector characteristics, the size characteristics, which you already pointed out, and nuances of any other aspect which is associated with the financial leverage.
Correct.
Even if you do not have the same sector, artificial intelligence, so you can actually compare poles apart as long as the underlying characteristics of the businesses are the same. So if artificial intelligence is, if I were to not able to get specifically nuanced to that, and anything which is under technology, which is growing at a rapid pace, I could start looking at that sector where I have betas. And that I could use as a surrogate parameter if the underlying characteristics are the same. Second thing is size. So you have used, so I do not know why 0.3 came up for a small size. You are also astonished and same here, which normal, unless if I were to unlever the larger size companies, their unlevered beta should have been 0.1 then it makes sense. Because what you looked at 0.3 was, I think, was unlevered because there was hardly any debt. 0.08 was the debt, right? So debt was negligible. So maybe if you were to look at it, or some data points inputs, because that's not possible. But when I looked at betas, if I wanted to use beta as part of my requirement of cost of equity, I go beyond sectors also, as long as it's a comparable sector for me. Take example of health and fitness, or take example of food and grocery. Would you value a big basket e-commerce as a food and grocery beta or a technology company beta? So these questions will come up for us, and my thought was that as long as we can look at the way the company is progressing and what's the core, we can pick up any other sector, any other stuff, and adjust it and take that as a beta. That was my thought. Please let me know what's your view on this.
See, the example that you took is a very, very correct example, and this often is poses one of the biggest challenges, particularly when it comes to startups. Because, for example, is Uber a transportation company or a technology platform company, right? Is let's say WeWork the best example, right? Is WeWork a real estate company or is it a technology platform company? Is a big question, right? And apparently, for a significantly long part, they managed to fool some of the most sophisticated investors in the face of this earth, right? So there are people who are saying that WeWork at the end of the day is nothing but an office rental company trying to masquerade itself as a technology company because it has some kind of a platform behind it. Correct. So these challenges will there, and honest, to be very, very honest, no one at any given point of time will be able to arrive at the right answers here. It is very judgmental, and this is the aspect, we are at that aspect of the entire exercise where perhaps the objectivity is at the lowest part. Correct. And the subjectivity is there. Here's where the experience and judgment comes up. But what one has to look at is, see, the key operative part of your question was that as long as the business factors are identical or they are the same, correct? That is the most critical and important part. Are they really the same is the question. If they are the same, and if you can justify and present in your note that they are the same, I don't see any issues, at least in the short to medium term, right? And one more aspect that one can do, if provided you have the time. For example, I experienced this question. For example, I have to do for a pharma company, right? Now, this particular pharma company that I'm talking about happens to be in API space. API space, correct? Now, in the listed company space, if you extract the moneycontrol.com data for all the pharma companies, you have the branded pharma companies which are into formulations. You go out into the market and buy the branded drugs there, right? You have the APIs, and you have even the biotech companies are included in the moneycontrol.com data. And then there are differences in the revenue mixes of all of these companies. Some companies might be 80% branded formulations and only 20% API. Some companies will be 80% API. You could, if you have the time, also delve into the segmental data of the listed companies and see from the segmental results what proportion of the revenues is coming from that segment which your target startup is addressing. For example, but then, and again, there is also the question that not all companies might be giving their segmental revenues by API formulations and all that part. A lot of companies might simply be giving segmental data by only geographical segments. Correct. So those issues are always there. So that is the reason why we cannot completely eliminate subjectivity in this this part of the exercise, and we are always working with a very, very limited time frame, right? Typically, when the client comes, he says, "I want a report in 2 days." In 2 days, you cannot do all of this research in any case, correct? Yeah. So that aspect also keeps weighing on your mind. So that is what it is, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Subraidu, one question on the, what is the adjustment to be done when you're looking at the volume of trading. See, the other side of it is what Harshad was saying, is how do you adjust for a discount for lack of marketability? But that's a different question. The issue is that how do you take those companies where there is sufficient volume of trading? So, for instance, when you mentioned ASM as being one of the smaller companies, I know this ASM. I would guess that there is hardly any trading in it. So, therefore, the beta does not, the stock does not move regardless of the market price. Right. So, how do you adjust for that?
See, there are formulas for discount or lack of marketability. Okay. But only thing is, how much of a complexity would you want to introduce and how much time you have is the question. There are models. If you want, I can share some of those mathematical models as to how to adjust for a discount for lack of marketability and discount. There are studies also on discount for lack of control also. But once again, those studies might
only in relation to beta. Only in relation to beta. Why are you, suppose you see what obviously seems to be happening is that for the small companies, the small segment companies, volume of trading is probably very low. That is why there is no move in the, that is why there is no move in the stock price.
Correct.
Okay, therefore the beta is lower.
Yeah.
So
see, there are some aspects, multiple ways. See, one, there's also a kind of a conflicting requirement. While on the one hand, if for startups, you have to focus not on the large companies, but on the small section of the industry. As you move from the large to the small, the volume keeps diminishing. Correct. So while the requirement for comparability might push you towards the small companies within the industry, one factor that might also keep increasing the risk is that the volume of trading is less. Logically, given a choice, if the volume of trading is very thin, I might prefer not to include that company at all in the first place. Because if the volume of trading is thin, there's also increased the likelihood of rigged prices, correct? So it is easy to rig the price of that particular share, and particularly if you're dealing with the Indian market, more so, correct? So the likelihood that the reported market price is a fair market value of that share also keeps going down, correct? So rather than think in terms of how to adjust for beta on account of thin trading, the question might be more important. Should you at all include that share at all in the sample is the bigger question, right? And I might prefer not to include it at all in the first place. But if at all, because of size constraints, I have to include it, I might rather include it in the discount for lack of marketability rather than include it in the beta. Okay, discount for lack of marketability might be adjusted after you've calculated the fair value of the share itself. I have not seen.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Subbaraidu, taking cue from Mr. Abraham, what he stated, another way is essentially if it's an unlisted technology, artificial intelligence, such kind of a company, I would consider, is it right to consider the recent technology investments by venture capital funds returns expectation, adjust it with the DLOM and control premium, which typically the standards that one tries to put it, and then the premium that you get is the equity that an investor expects. And once you know implied equity, you know the equity risk premium, even Damodaran for generally equity risk premium is given for the country. Indirectly, you can calculate the beta if one were to calculate beta. Wouldn't that method, because if it's a startup or such kind, then you have the examples of this venture investments. Venture investments are indirectly giving us their implied, the cost of equity, which is indirectly an implied beta. Is that not the better way to look at it?
But my question there would be, if let us say the data about recent PE fund investments of a particular company is available with you, okay, then maybe it could be better off to apply the market approach instead of the income approach, because please remember the beta is a step in estimating weighted average cost of capital, which you have to use to discount cash flows, basically the income approach, correct?
True that. No. Since I was just referring to the beta calculation, whether we could have used a comparable market approach, yes, that's correct. Since the entire discussion was about betas, if one were to look at betas, because when the data is not available with lot of assumptions behind it, you look at alternate methods where less of assumptions is a preferred way. is what I understood from Damodaran.
To be honest, sir, if the information about PE investment in certain companies is available, number one, and number two, it is also available that what EV to revenue or what EV to EBITDA multiple is available. If both of these data points were to be available, I think one would be very, very much better off applying the market approach itself directly rather than the income approach. That will give us more accurate estimations of enterprise values rather than income approach.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
So one quick, how do we use it across geographies? If we can just take up the beta, isn't it the volatility of the particular stock is intrinsic to that particular geography? I'm surprised that there is no adjustment for the geography at all.
See, again, depends on which geography. I mean, if the geography for which you have the data is one of the most mature market, one of the most active markets within which PE investing is happening across the world, correct? Then it is perhaps a more accurate indicator of what enterprise value should be. I mean, but if you ask me, which is the most vibrant market for PE investments and startups in the world today, it would be the Silicon Valley area, and let's say even the US, even the East Coast would be one of the most vibrant markets available. They would be more reliable estimates than any other market today. Correct. So,
sir, to add to this point, when we are using the beta here, and let's presume that we have used the beta of a different geography, but we are still taking the risk-free rate of return of the geography in which the entity is operating.
Good. Yes, that's right. That's right.
We are getting late for the next session. Can we start?
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions you can keep in the chat session. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Subraidu, for patiently answering all the participants' queries.